You're watching TVC Breakfast. The donations to support Nigeria's efforts in handling the coronavirus pandemic has reached over 15 billion naira, thanks to the magnanimity of donors comprising of individuals and corporate bodies. But there are concerns for the efficient distribution and use of the funds to ensure that it meets the reason why contributions were rolled out in the first place. SERAP had at some point called for the publication of how the funds were being utilized for the purpose of accountability. This also mirrored the thoughts of other Nigerians who want transparency in the disbursement of funds. Joining me now via Skype to talk more on this is campaigner, anti-corruption activist, founder, Follow the Money, CEO, Connected Development Code, Hamzat Lawal. Hamzat, good morning. It's good to have you join me right now. It's good to have you. Now, a lot of Nigerians from our interactions are very concerned with how the monies that are being donated by a lot of Nigerians and corporate bodies will be utilized and used judiciously. I wonder if you have heard, or I wonder if you have concerns.
Well, thank you for having me. Yes, we definitely have concerns. When the government set up the presidential task force and also mandated them, and if you listen to President Muhammadu Buhari's speech, he said there needed to be a coordinated effort to ensure judicious use of these resources to ensure, public good. And we have concerns because if you look at all this donation being made both by government, private institution, and individual, there's some lack of coordination. From the private sector side, where Dangote leads the private sector coalition, this coordination and this bit of transparency. But from the government side, this lack of transparency, this lack of coordination. And I would give you a few examples. When NNPC came public and said they were donating $30 million, which is 11 billion naira, at first they said, they were donating this to COVID-19 intervention. And then when we asked the GMD of NNPC, what he said was contrary to what the press release or the press statement said. And he said, the companies are going to donate this item using their own policy and procurement practice. But that was not what the press release said. And for FCT administration, for instance, they got 500 million from a private bank. I would not mention name. And we asked them, what would you do with this 500 million? They said 200 million will go to NCDC. And they were mute on the 300 million. So there's been lack of transparency and coordination. And we have called on the Minister of Finance and say, can you aggregate this information? Follow the money aggregated and map all the donation that have been made. And it is in the tune of over 40 billion. But government is saying 15 billion from their end, but they're not giving specific. I think it's important at this time and to entrench transparency and accountability and also to uphold open contracting standard and the open government partnership that Nigeria is a signatory to. Because right now there's going to be a lot of procurement being made. Are they going to publish these contracting proceedings? Are they going to allow for competitive bidding? So we're very much concerned. And because we also know that, from experience and because a lot of Nigeria have collective amnesia, let me take you down memory lane. If you go back 2012 when we had flooding that ravaged this country and divided us into two, if you go to 2014, where we released 9.2 billion to procure 750,000 clean cool stove and 18,000 wonder bag. When we go to 2016, when governors got the Paris Club refund, when we go to 2017, when they got $1.5 million each in the 36 state and the FCT, up to date, they've not been a proper audit that have been undertaken. And for us, it follows the money as much as right now we're all at home, we're washing our hands with soap, and of course, enforcing social distance. So we can't go on the field, we can't ground truth and provide holistic oversight on the disbursement and utilization of these funds. But we've deployed technology tool. We're engaging government using technology means, and government needs to respond appropriately and ensure that these funds are judiciously used. But most importantly, they need to give citizens information and give feedback. Mind you, we're also tackling another scourge called fake news, and lack of information propagates fake news. So, government has a unique opportunity to galvanize citizens to build that public trust in providing timely information. And the Ministry of Finance must spearhead this approach in aggregating information and publishing it in real time. Yesterday, Jack Dorsey, or the CEO of Twitter, committed $1 billion, to tackle COVID-19. And he made it public, providing a spreadsheet where this money would go to. Why can't our government, do that? Why can't we have that?
All right. Now, a lot of Nigerians were saying that because of the experiences, like you just took us back memory lane from the days in 2012 where we had the floods ravaging a lot of states in this country, a lot of Nigerians are saying, based on our experience, all this money is coming in should come in terms of equipment instead of raw cash, so that whatever it is, if you're giving us 200,000 beds, or you're giving us 700,000 mattresses, or you're giving us 1 billion packs of drugs, they can be tangibly shared across the country one way or the other. What do you say to this?
Mind you, even if you bring donations and you donate them to government, government is still saddled with the responsibility to get the needed manpower and pay this manpower to ensure that these donations are used effectively. I agree we should get donation, but we should also get cash so that we can provide salaries, wages, and allowances to these healthcare workers who are on the front line. So we need both donation and cash. But again, we cannot say that, as much as we don't trust government because government has not provided confidence, we should then abdicate the role of government to private individuals or institutions. Government must take leading role and coordinate effectively to ensure proper oversight, transparency, and accountability. And just to also state that Follow the Money would undertake a social audit after COVID-19, and the ban has been lifted that we can now, socialize. We would undertake a social audit because this public resources, we must ensure it's used for public good. And if you look at the social investment, for instance, the conditional cash transfer, well, I call it the conditional cash payment. It's really sad and unfortunate that, as much as government is providing lip service to cushion the effect, this is just an intervention that have been going on. So there's no new intervention to cushion the effect apart from the over 60,000 grains that the president has approved. And the first phase of disbursement is 6,000 for Abuja, Lagos, and Osun State. So I believe that the government needs to be proactive and come clean and say, this is what we're providing into this household. And how did you come up with this over 2 million household of 11 million citizens that you tag the poorest of the poor? Because again, when you're also disbursing cash by hand, how do we oversight and track these resources that are being disbursed? This also goes against the Nigerian policy on cashless economy. So what exactly are we saying and what are we doing in that state? So the government must uphold a transparency and accountability standard and ensure that they also open up, to get constructive feedback and engage citizens holistically. And if you look at this presidential task force, who is the civil society representative on this task force? And why are we not getting briefing, financial briefing, apart from the other briefing we get around healthcare and other economic, effects that this COVID-19 would impact Nigeria?
All right. Now, Hamza, the NCDC and the Federal Ministry of Health have been coordinating activities of COVID-19, have been updating Nigerians, and have been keeping the data straight. A lot of Nigerians from our interactions in the past few weeks, have said that there is no need for a presidential task force on COVID-19 because the NCDC and the Ministry of Health were doing a great job before they even came on board in the first place.
No, I think there's need for a presidential task force because you need high-level coordination, and of course, this fight, the president must spearhead this fight, and he has now, constituted that task force and mandated Boss Mustafa and also have other members of the task force. What I also did not see in this task force is, having a stronger education policy. Schools have been shut down. Before now, Nigeria have over 10 million out of school children. Now, all the children are at home, both the ones that are out of school and the ones that have been in school. But there is no policy, regulation, or any framework that would allow them to learn, while at home. I know some states like Kaduna and Lagos states and other states have said, we're going to roll out content using radio and television, but there's no national policy around it. You cannot argue we need a national team to coordinate this effort. Yes, we commend the NCDC and the Ministry of Health for being on the front line on this, but if you look at it, they've not provided concrete data yet. Yes, we have data of the numbers of people who have tested positive, negative, people who have been discharged and the deaths we have suffered. But there's no data on how many tests Nigeria has carried out so far. If you look at other countries, there's data of how many tests they've carried out daily and the total number of tests. But when you ask this question, they only give you an aggregate information. We need specific. How many tests have NCDC conducted since the outbreak of COVID-19? This will also help to foster more transparency and accountability from their own part, as much as they're on the front line, and we commend them for being on the front line. But we must see clearer terms and give us specific data as a country to also inform our healthcare needs and system. But most importantly, where's the Minister of Education in all of this? Because you must provide educational intervention for these children that are at home. And what are the plans to ensure that when schools open, how would they meet their curriculum? And, because we've lost
Okay.
some amount of days.
All right. We have to leave it here now. Hamzat Lawal, thank you so much for talking to us on TVC News. Thank you. You're watching TVC Breakfast. Now, donations to support Nigeria's efforts in handling the coronavirus pandemic has reached over 15 billion thanks to the magnanimity of donors comprising of individuals and corporate bodies. But there are concerns for the efficient distribution and use of the funds to ensure that it meets the reason why contributions were rolled out in the first place. SERAP had at some point called for the publication of how the funds were being utilized for the purpose of accountability. This also mirrored the thoughts of other Nigerians who want transparency in the disbursement of funds. Joining me now via Skype to talk more on this is the campaigner, anti-corruption activist and founder Follow the Money, and the CEO Connected Development, that's also called CODE, Hamzat Lawal. It's good to have you join me this morning on the program. Now, can you make us understand, from donations, the list that we have been seeing so far, if it is anything to go by, then the monies that are rolling in from Nigerians and from corporate bodies should be something close to about 50 billion naira so far, if all that is anything to go by. Now, the Minister of Finance on Monday was addressing the press, and he said that some account numbers have been opened where those monies can be sent, and he gave the names of the banks. Certainly, I wouldn't mention that now. But talk to us basically. What do you think is an ideal template for transparency that will make Nigerians satisfied with the disbursement of this fund?
Well, thank you for having me. I think what's important now more than ever before is greater transparency. And what that means is for the minister to aggregate this information. We know that Nigeria has embarked on the TSA, which is Treasury Single Account. And now we're hearing that they've created another account and link it to the TSA account. Why do we have to create other accounts in other private banks? I know that when the private sector coalition on COVID-19, headed by Aliko Dangote, when they started their mobilization drive for COVID-19 intervention fund, they opened their own accounts, both Naira and domiciliary accounts, which is dollar accounts, in the CBN. So their account is domiciled at the CBN. So why are we having government open about 4 or 5 other accounts, separate accounts in different banks, just to mobilize these resources? And I think the Minister of Finance, now more than ever before, have to come public and tell us how much exactly have been mobilized and what are these funds being used for. And this is quite simple. All she needs to do is create a spreadsheet. Let's put income, expenditure, publicly, so that citizens can track and ensure these funds are used judiciously. Also, are we also adhering to, open government partnership, open contracting standard? Nigeria is a signatory to the Open Government Partnership. I also think that, our politicians, first, the executive came and said they're going to donate 50% of their March salary to the COVID-19 intervention. What is 50% of your salary? Before now we've had this debate. What are our politicians earning? What are the ministers and House of Rep members? What are they earning? The Speaker of the House of Representatives did a video and said, the March and April salary of members would be donated to COVID-19. what is March and April salary? Because we cannot donate percentage and just, when you look at Nigeria budget, for instance, our appropriation is not based on percentage. There are budget line item for our appropriation. I believe that, these people have to come forward. I also remember the governor of Kwara State said since his inauguration, since May 2019, he has not spent a single kobo of his salary till date. And it makes me wonder, oh, wow, what has he been surviving on since that time till now? And that he's donating all this amount of money to COVID-19 intervention. How much is this money? We need to come public and we need to build public trust, because when you don't provide information, you're allowing for fake news peddlers to have a party over us. So, as much as we're tackling COVID-19, we need to also tackle fake news, as it were.
Hamzat, the issue of data is very central to this issue, because when you're talking about those who are meant to benefit from the impact of COVID-19, where they are, what strata of society they belong to, what they have access to, where they reside, and how to get these things to them, Nigerians are very concerned. How challenging do you think that data is to the utilization of these funds?
Data is very important, and it's only government that can provide you with, access to this data. So, for instance, we're not even talking about what's the impact of COVID-19 on unemployment. What's the impact of COVID-19 on small businesses? Government have not come forward and say these are the palliative we're going to provide, to middle income earners. In the U.S., for instance, they're giving $600 to $1,000. In Canada, they're giving about $2,000 to citizens just to cushion the effect of COVID-19 in that country. Our government have not come and say, this is how we're going to support SMEs. These are the data of unemployment rate, or how this would impact unemployment, and how this is also impacting education and other sectors of the economy. Because data, and I think now more than ever before, the National Bureau of Statistics have to, chunk out all this information in real time so that we can make informed decision. Because without data, without availability of data and access to this data in a timely manner, then what are we using as a benchmark for our decision as we tackle COVID-19? And speaking about data, NCDC, as much as yes, I commend them for leading the front around, this pandemic, but how many people have been tested so far? I'm not talking about people that have tested positive or negative. How many people since, this pandemic outbreak in Nigeria, how many people have been tested? We need this information also to inform policy and decision making. I think for us to also mobilize and unite Nigeria, information is central to build public trust and galvanize public support.
All right, Hamzat Lawal, thank you so much for talking to us on TVC. Now, donations to support Nigeria's efforts in handling the coronavirus pandemic has reached over 15 billion naira, thanks to the magnanimity of donors comprising of individuals and corporate bodies. But there are concerns for the efficient distribution and use of the funds to ensure that it meets the reason why distribution or contributions were rolled out in the first place. SERAP had at some point called for the publication of how the funds were being utilized for the purpose of accountability. This also mirrored the thoughts of other Nigerians who want transparency in the disbursement of funds. Joining me now via Skype to talk more on this is a campaigner, anti-corruption activist, founder, Follow the Money, and CEO, Connected Development Code, Hamzat Lawal. Hamzat, it's good to have you join me right now. Now, let me start with one of the, from your observation, as you have met people, how aware do you think Nigerians are in knowing COVID-19? There has been so much on TV, there has been so much on radio, there's been so much on billboards. But when you see Nigerians sometimes, a lot of people still doubt that something exists as is called COVID-19. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, Nigerians are aware about COVID-19, they're informed, but they're not taking it as serious as they should. Because if you look at the trend and information from Twitter and also feelers from radio programs, some people still think it's an elitic problem. Also, I think some of our leaders are not helping matters because if you look at the utterances of some political and religious leaders, it has not been helpful to tackle the scourge. And of course, if you look at the behavior of some political leaders, they've also floated this, 14 days self-quarantine. So a lot of people out there are aware, they're informed, but they're not taking it as serious as they should, which is quite unfortunate.
All right, now this donations coming in now. A lot of people are saying that if they are properly used, even after the post COVID-19, that some of the funds can be deployed to upgrade hospitals and the health sector as a whole. What do you say?
Oh, definitely. I think COVID-19 has sort of reset Nigeria. If you look at what's happening now, everyone is now looking inwards, where state governors, where legislators, and even the executive are now living above par. Where now, we're seeing a lot of attention in the health sector. The past decade, Nigeria have abandoned her health sector. You've seen that, from responses, we've not really invested as much as we should have before now in the health sector. Yes, post COVID-19, this investment will go a long way if we're able to utilize them, if we're able to maintain them effectively and ensure that, we expand in those investments. I'm quite excited that, we're using this opportunity to provide the needed attention and investment in the health sector. And I believe post COVID-19, it will go a long way.
People have said that COVID-19 is a leveler. They use the term is a leveler, where those who even have what it takes to travel to all the parts of the world to seek medical attention cannot go anywhere right now. They are forced to stay. Everyone is forced to stay within the country. But talk to us basically, what do you think is going to change after COVID-19 about the way we live and about the way we approach things?
I think everything would change because COVID-19 is not just a health crisis, it's a humanitarian crisis, it's an economic crisis, it's a political crisis, and a social crisis. Everything would change. And I think a lot of people are now very conscious, politically speaking, because when we go to the poll in 2023, a lot of things would inform how people make their choices, because it tells you now that we're not just looking for a leader who would lead us and manage our vast resources. We're also looking for someone who would mobilize resources, who would inspire, and who would also jump in front of crisis and lead Nigeria to greater height. Businesses would change, how people view life would change, because post COVID-19, you would see a lot of new opportunities, a lot of new businesses will spring up. And right now, businesses are actually springing up because as much as we can't go on the street, people are using virtual space. And even governance has changed, where even government now engage more on social media. You see, COVID-19 have provided a unique opportunity, and also to show us that, as humans, we're more united than ever before, where we're now looking inwards and looking at, what are the strengths, what are the values, and how can everyone play their own role.
All right, Hamzat Lawa, thank you so much for talking to us on TVC.